Let the truck!
You are listening to What the Truck. Welcome back, everyone. It's Monday. It's a new week. It's What the Truck. We're live here in our studio in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Going to have a fun show. Today, we're going to be talking about some freight science and technology. So happy Monday to you all as well. We're going to have a pretty exciting time. So what are we going to be diving into? Well, we're going to have some news and headlines, and then our guests for today. Our first one coming up later is going to be Angie Acocella. She's research scientist at the MIT Center for Transportation and Logistics. They are, of course, one of the premier folks who do the science behind freight. It's always a pleasure to see what they're working on. We can dive into some of the research as well, because, you know, for all you folks out there, it's one thing to get your news from the X platform and other places, but we like to bring some science and education every once in a while. And because I don't have the rights to Schoolhouse Rock, we're gonna have much more fun and talk to some folks who are much smarter than me about the science behind freight. Then coming up in the second half of this show, we're gonna be talking with Grace Sharkey. She's the senior manager now of communications and PR at Orderful. So a lot of cool stuff going on over there. A little freight science, a little freight tech, all fun freight stuff. Okay, before we dive in, let's also thank our sponsor, the folks at Verizon Business. So check them out, Verizon Business. We also have an ad, so let's kick it over to the ad real quick.
Big.
Small.
Essential.
Big.
Small!
Essential.
Small.
Essential.
Grande.
Pequeño.
Esencial.
No matter what business you're in, Verizon Business has the network and solutions you need to power it.
Boom, check it out. I'm a sucker for well-made B-roll, so those of you who are listeners who are just hearing it, there's some really cool shots of supply chains of all types and telematics. Check them out, Verizon Business. Let's dive into some headlines now. The first one is coming from the main FreightWaves.com site. Eric Coolish writes that UPS is extending its buyout offer deadline after low driver interest. The union workers were given until mid-August to accept a voluntary exit package. Well, unfortunately, it looks like for their van drivers, they're extending the buyout package by 2 weeks as the program has not met its target for eliminating jobs. The integrated parcel carrier had initially given drivers until July 31st to apply for the voluntary separation offer, but the Teamsters Union posted on its Facebook page on Friday that the package giant quietly extended the deadline for its devious driver voluntary severance plan. Devious driver. That is wild. I wonder if that's actually a real quote. A spokesperson for the union declined to provide details, but an individual at a local Teamsters office on the West Coast said that UPS is giving delivery drivers until August 14th to take the buyout. Unfortunately, details are a little scarce because the person is not authorized to speak with the media and is not being identified to avoid any employer repercussions. This comes as UPS's CEO Carol Tomei said on the company's July 29th earnings conference call that the buyout offered has generated a lot of interest so far, but that the company has not announced how many people have signed up and whether the package is over or undersubscribed. A UPS spokesperson declined to provide any update on the situation. Kicking it over a little bit here, we're going to container bookings. Zach Strickland, he is a market expert at Sonar, had wrote that freight demand is on shaky footing as import bookings drop. This comes as container bookings are down 13% year over year, according to data from Sonar. The import demand ticker on Sonar, IOTI, has collapsed over the past month. It has joined the truckload ticker, OTVI, and posting double-digit year-over-year declines. Intermodal, though, which is O-Rail, has remained relatively resilient, but given its close ties to import volumes, it may not be far behind. Zach Strickland writes that uncertainty continues to dominate business decision-making as companies remain impacted, whether directly or indirectly, by erratic trade policies and the rhetoric surrounding them. While this market has been anything but predictable, current indicators point to a relatively soft second half of 2025. So keep an eye out as well. The He who understands the containers and maritime usually understands the supply chain, if you're thinking in the truckload space. Speaking of which, John Kingston writes that truck sales in the second quarter might have been the worst performing metric of all. This comes through several earnings calls as executives are talking of an extremely weak market, but there is the possibility of a little bit of optimism moving forward. Unfortunately, though, for trucking companies, Q2 was not a great quarter, especially as truckload carriers' outlooks are worsening. When we're thinking about it, Rush Enterprise had also hiked its dividend and Cummins as well. But when we're looking at earnings calls with analysts, several companies that looked into the future are saying that a market for new heavy duty vehicles is tepid at best and terrible at worst. So you can check out the full story, of course, on the FreightWaves.com website. And finally, we're shifting gears a little bit into the autonomous space. Plus AI and Goodyear have teamed up to enhance their autonomous trucks with intelligent tire tech. This comes as the collaboration integrates sightline data into SuperDrive for better safety, performance, and varied driver conditions. And so Plus AI is collaborating with the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company. What they're going to be doing is taking tire data from Goodyear's intelligent tire technology suite, and that is called Sightline. The collaboration is going to help with the Plus's virtual AI driver, which is called SuperDrive. And so Sightline is helping SuperDrive. One thing you need to understand in the autonomous trucking space is that the virtual drivers all have names. And so it's important to make that distinction because the OEMs are making the vehicles with the hardware, but the virtual driver and the software is where we get to hear of your Kodiaks, your Pluses, your Auroras, and the other ones. So keep an eye out for that in the space. The tire stuff is very fascinating because Goodyear has quite a bit of telematics. I know in the EV space, tire wear is different, but we really are starting to collect early data in terms of how autonomous vehicles are operating. You got to imagine that a virtual driver may drive differently than a human, and for the folks who do tires, that could be a big thing to pay attention to. So check it out. Got a lot more great stories here on the FreightWaves.com website. Let's kick it over to our guest now. We're super excited to be welcoming on Angie Acocella. She's a research scientist at the MIT Center for Transportation and Logistics. Angie, absolute pleasure to have you on. It's always fun to get to reconnect, and this time it's live over the air.
Yeah. How you doing, Thomas? Really good to be here.
And y'all have been pretty busy. I was checking out your stuff. You've been on some podcasts as well. Talking about freight science, let's first talk about what your research entails, and then we'll dive into some recent stuff and current stuff that you're working on.
Yeah, sure. So essentially, my work is all in freight transportation, how goods move from point A to point B. So here at the Center for Transportation and Logistics at MIT, we essentially work with companies, use data from actual companies, whether it's procurement data, operational data, driver data, to try to help companies solve some of their transportation issues, right? A lot of what I work on is in procurement, market dynamics, things like that. We can talk I could talk for days about this, but generally that's what I'm working on these days.
And let's talk about one of the ones you had recently wrote as well. This one is Elephants or Goldfish, an empirical analysis of carrier reciprocity in dynamic freight markets. I really like this because you all are putting the science behind what instinctively some people have in the tribal knowledge. You kind of wonder how things go. Let's talk a little bit about this and highlight some of the information, because I think right now this is very, very useful information as we are still in the doldrums and wondering how shippers and carriers are treating one another.
Yes. So this one's actually really cool. I'm glad you brought this up. So this project, we looked at essentially as market dynamics shift from a soft market into a tight market. What do carriers do during that tight market? Do they essentially remember shippers' previous good behavior, right? Do they remember, consistent tendering, pricing, things like that? Or from the soft market, or are they looking at, in that tight market, what's happening right now, right? That elephants or goldfish. Do they have long memories like elephants, or do they have kind of more myopic thinking like goldfish? And so, yes, the title's a little catchy, but essentially what we're trying to do is exactly that. Look at historically data between these shipper-carrier pairs, the relationship over time, and see how does that long-term relationship impact the dynamics, or really carriers' acceptance and pricing during tight markets. And essentially we found that the biggest thing that carriers are responding to in these tight markets is the current pricing that shippers have. So are you paying close to or a little bit above market in a tight market? you're going to be getting that acceptance. Whereas if you're paying too low in a tight market, if you historically haven't been a great shipper, carriers aren't really responding to that. They need to see both good pricing and consistency of your tendering during that tight market. What's really interesting, kind of fun about this project is we've now taken the flip side. So been a little bit more fair to the shippers and said, okay, well, as we go from a tight market now into the subsequent soft market like we are now, how are shippers responding to carriers' behaviors in that tight market? So are shippers saying, I'm going to pay you more, or I'm going to give you more volume in a soft market if you historically have been good to me, you've had better pricing or better acceptance in the past in a tight market to these carriers? We're kind of towards the end of that research now, but we are seeing essentially there's a large segmentation of the way that shippers and carriers interact over time. We do see these carriers and shippers having strong relationships, meaning in a soft market, a carrier is getting a lot more volume if it historically has had better performance. So we're seeing evidence so far that shippers are a little bit more like elephants. They are historically looking at what's happened in the past and then offering volume to carriers that have historically been good to them, had good performance. So we should have better, more concise results of that soon in the next few months.
Well, it's definitely the important thing to think about is I like your point on tendering consistently because right now in this market, I've experienced it many times where let's say we're committed to 50 loads a week. Well, the customer may only send us 40 now. And so we get various excuses. Well, I didn't have enough product. And you're really just having to take them at face value until if you see that those load tenders are actually going down the routing guide. And so it's so fascinating. Your research is so important because the supply chain is still one of the very few places where if we make a deal with an RFP, we make an agreement to haul this freight, there's not really a legal mechanism to come after you if you don't hold up your end of the bargain. And so one of the things you also had highlighted, which I think is very fascinating and ties into this tender consistency, is ghost lanes. And so one of the cool things to think about is that even during the good times or the bad, you may be making a deal with a shipper, but it turns out these lanes in the routing guide, which were supposed to be maybe 5 in a week, may actually have been 5 during a 1 month period. So talk about some of that as well, and then we'll tie it back into what this myopic carrier behavior can lead to, because I've got some good anecdotes with that as well.
Yeah, totally. So essentially, ghost lanes, what we identified were essentially 70% of these are full truckload contracts never end up getting used. No volume goes through that contract, right? And like you said, Thomas, there's no repercussions really for it. Now, could a carrier bring a shipper to court? It's going to be costly anyway, so it's going to cost more than the lost shipment. So 70% of these shipments aren't, or these lanes aren't being used. And so we said, okay, well, what if we just take those out of the procurement event? Why are we putting contracts on those lanes that are likely not to materialize? And we found, they're new lanes, they're lanes that had low volume historically, or were these ghost lanes last year, right? So we're kind of consistently having the same lanes just put in the procurement event. So can we identify these lanes that are not performing well under contract or not likely to materialize anyway and procure them differently? And so essentially what we found is the best place for contracts is high volume, consistent volume, and we can measure that in many different ways. Every company, every shipper I've talked to, consistency is defined differently, right? You can have a lane that had 40 shipments, but it's supposed to have 50, or you could have all 50, but they were all in one day, right? Those are two different lanes. Or, you have 50 shipments every week, only for 3 months of the year, right? So those types of lanes, contracts don't make sense, or the long-term, year-long, annual fixed price contract does not make sense. But the lanes where it's easy operationally for a carrier to cover, contracts work great. That inconsistency, thinking about this, the main topic here is thinking about how does your freight impact your carrier's operations and their ability to complete their network, their balanced network, right? And so that inconsistency comes up because carriers don't know what to plan for, right? And that's where we can talk more about segmentation and different types of alternatives to that long-term fixed price contract. Shorter term contracts, we can get into this, but API pricing, strategic use of spot, things like that for, the 80%, 70, 80% of lanes that are 20% of your volume, right?
Let's dive into that as well. I think your research is onto something. One of the things that over the past 5 years, a conversation has been is the market penetration of freight brokerages. Traditionally, a freight brokerage and a 3PL and a 4PL would operate on the periphery. They do spot transactional, but now we're seeing them developing more in terms of routing guide penetration. And one of my theories is I wonder if some of these customers are checking out some of the research and they said, well, you're right. If I only do this, let's say a salt load, a seasonal load out of certain areas, well, maybe I can diversify a little more. That folks are using trailer pools now, and I can still have my regular carriers, but now we're seeing more access to these brokerages and by extension, the smaller carriers. Talk about some of that because I do hear from people that the old 1 year long RFP, one and done, is now very fluid and dynamic, and it's very much based on perceived or current conditions.
Yeah, yeah. So a couple things in there. One, the use of 3PLs or brokers. Definitely, it used to be a four-letter word, right? And now it's these brokers, these 3PLs are adding a lot more value for a number of reasons. One, you can have, some of these large ones. I work with C.H. Robinson a lot with their data, their team, what they're offering, and a lot of, the FreightWaves folks as well, offering data analysis to help customers understand the market and their own business better, right? Benchmarking, offering analytics around the market. So they're offering a lot more value than just connecting to a shipment or to capacity. The second thing is that brokers, time and time again in my research, I see that brokers or 3PLs are much better at covering these inconsistent demand lanes because, right, they can aggregate capacity from typically smaller carriers that are using them. So if you have these difficult, typically operationally difficult lanes to cover from an asset-based provider, a broker is going to be able to cover that much better because they know they have access to a much larger pool of capacity. So that's where they're adding a lot of value. Then you get to, okay, how are we accessing these brokers? Totally, there's much better routing guide penetration, as you said, right? So using API pricing, essentially getting access to the spot market faster so you can potentially get better pricing, and using them more strategically as a way to, a broker maybe understands my business better than if I'm working directly with a carrier who I have to explain everything that I need to do. So I think there's a dramatic shift towards using brokers a lot more strategically. Somewhat relatedly, another project we did recently was looking at how shippers are using the spot market more strategically as well, kind of related to all of this. And so we saw that historically, up until COVID, even through market dynamics, even through soft and tight markets, the amount of freight that goes directly to the spot market, not through a contract, was on average about 5% of shipments. During COVID, about 10% of shipments were going directly to the spot market. Now, typically what you would see is once the market recovered to a softer market like we are in now, you might expect that amount of shipments going directly to the spot market being back to 5%. Well, it hasn't. Throughout this long soft market that we've had, we've still seen about 10% of shipments directly going to spot at 10%. And so that also suggests there's a strategic mindset change, actually, of the use of brokers, the use of the spot market, and how that all fits within their total portfolio of freight.
It does tie directly into, we've got more capabilities. One of them is index-based pricing, whether it's contract or spot. This is very fascinating because it feels like when I started in 14, now I'm 11 years in the industry. It does feel like night and day in terms of the availability of information. When it used to be very tribal knowledge, it was very cloistered away. Let's talk about that. One of the things you all are working on is the end of set it and forget it pricing, index freight contract design under uncertainty. And right now we have quite a bit of uncertainty if you think of the talks of the supply chain. Tell us a little bit about what that research is, because I think you all are onto something. We are seeing I wouldn't say a paradigm shift, but we are seeing a fundamental shift in the way that these folks are approaching things because there's just more data than there was in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. The biggest thing that I'm trying to put out with my research is also that we need a little bit of flexibility in the way that we budget or the way that we think about our transportation spend, right? So historically, we've wanted to put contracts on everything. That's why we get ourselves into this ghost lane situation. We want to put contracts on everything because we want to know what we're spending, right? If we put contracts in at the wrong time of the market, so say the market's shifting or we have a soft market and we want to lock in prices before we get to a tight market, we see over and over again, those contracts are not going to hold, right? You're going to lock in low prices, but you're not going to use those contracts. They're going to come back to you, right? And so the question then is, well, how can we make sure that our contract prices are staying up to date? Back to the elephants or goldfish, carriers are accepting and prioritizing freight that's priced well to the current market. So how do we make sure that we can have some benefit of the contract, meaning I'm working with carriers I trust, meaning I have some control over what the price will be. We can design mechanisms for the pricing so that we do that. But there's also this ability for the price to fluctuate so that it's representative of the market, so that my carriers are still prioritizing me. And so we looked at, one, how do you do that? So there's a lot of questions around, well, which index do you peg it to, right? Is it a national index, or do you have an index that's specific to every single lane? If so, how do you get that? Do you have pricing that is going to update every day or every month or every quarter, right? So there's still a lot of questions around the best way to do that. And essentially it depends on your demand, your business, your regional reach, things like that. And then though, we can demonstrate where it makes sense to do that. So essentially back to these inconsistent lanes, these low volume lanes where you're traditionally going to the spot market anyway, but maybe it's still very seasonal, but you have still a lot of volume. You don't want to be so uncertain in what the price will be. So maybe you can build in some collars or kind of some upper and lower bounds to what I'm willing to pay, but the price can fluctuate a little bit within those two bounds. And so we demonstrated that, yeah, you can get better pricing, you can get better acceptance from your carriers, and you can also have carriers getting better revenue as compared to if they were just trying to find their own shipments on the spot market. So we actually even piloted this. We did a experiment with one partner company here and implemented index-based pricing on about 10 of their lanes with multiple carriers, and did kind of a causal analysis, kind of the gold standard for saying, yes, this pricing caused cost reductions. And we were able to demonstrate that. In fact, about a 10% reduction in transportation costs as a result of had they implemented index-based pricing across all of the lanes, their inconsistent kind of low volume lanes.
And final thoughts as well. I like where this is going. It reminds me of the talk of if you think of the DOE, like a fuel surcharge. So we have this agreed upon scale with the Department of Energy, and then there's sliding. So a future state could be eventually where, to get over the constant need of RFPs, if you do well on service, if you take all the tenders I accept, maybe at the end of the month, I'm going to calculate what the average rate was for the month. And if I turns out I'm a little under, I'm going to give you that back as a bonus at the end. You can use this as a strategy to say, we understand that market dynamics are changing. You've taken care of us. Now we're going to show you the money. And it also kind of helps with the carriers, because going back to the goldfish analogy, when I worked in operations, it was literally every week. We had an entire thing at US Express called Win the Week. They were so focused on just winning this one week as part of a KPI goal that there was no way to understand. And when we go to RFPs, it was like, holy cow, your brain just explodes because you couldn't remember the stuff you did the last quarter. So I think that's really fascinating. Looking ahead, let's talk a little bit about some of the stuff. If you need folks who are interested in partnering and helping out, what's the research areas right now you're looking for in terms of information and participants?
Totally. Yeah. So anything related to procurement still, right? So we're doing a lot more on segmentation. That means what aspects of your network make sense to go to contract versus spot versus, API pricing or things like that. We're doing work in market dynamics. And then we're also doing more work. I didn't talk about this today, but more work on kind of the driver and the carrier side. So trying to understand what makes best sense for them. You notice I'm talking a lot about what makes most sense for shippers and their procurement, but from the carrier side, how should you be bidding? what percentage of your shipments or your contracts should be with which different shippers, things like that. We're also looking at infrastructure, so critical infrastructure, parking for drivers, kind of a whole host of things. I talked a lot about full truckload today, but we're also expanding to other modes. So, in LTL, in ocean and container, there's a broad range of stuff I did not talk about, but anything, again, back to anything related to freight, we're open to working on that.
We'll definitely have to have you on again to talk about some of these other modes. We got enough for a whole hour's worth of content, but if folks want to sign up, they want to learn more and get involved, where should they send their information? What's the best way to reach out and get more info so we can hopefully get some folks to help with this research and make it all a little bit of a less chaotic supply chain?
Totally. Yeah. So they can email me. My email is just my last name. So it's acocella@mit.edu. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can go to the MIT Center for Transportation and Logistics website. And there's a lot more stuff that you can find there. All of our resources, all the projects that we have are all also there as well.
Perfect. Angie, thank you so much for your time. We'll definitely have to catch up again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.
Check them out. The folks at MIT FreightLab. It is always amazing. Contribute to knowledge and help out. This is some of the really cool stuff that trickles down and we see behaviors changing. So always a pleasure to have them on. Let's shift gears a little bit. That we're going to be bringing back one of our regulars. I don't think I need much introduction from Miss Grace Sharkey, but she is now with the folks at Orderful doing communications and PR. We're going to be talking a little bit about some freight technology now. And Grace, absolute pleasure to have you on. Welcome back.
Yeah, happy to be here. Happy to see your wonderful face. Miss doing these segments with you too. So it's a good way to start my Monday. Let's say that.
We're bringing the energy. You don't even need coffee. And I think one of the cool things that you guys are working on is packaging, labeling. There's so much technology. For folks who don't know what Orderful does, let's talk about a little bit about what the company does, and we'll dive into some of the cool things that you were working on.
Yeah, so we're your go-to for your EDI integrations. Particularly, we take EDI, a legacy type of infrastructure, and we use more modern API services to make those connections work and make it easier for you. And honestly, Thomas, the cool thing is there's a lot of problems and areas and pain points that EDI helps solve. We're starting to see a number of logistics providers out there who are scaling, looking to meet regulatory requirements, even, a lot of M&A action, companies coming together. How do we integrate these systems, right? To, of course, make sure data is flowing appropriately and that, trade doesn't slow down. And at a time, I'm sure you could agree, we don't want to see trade slow down any more than it has. And you're right. We actually did have one of our first vibe code releases out this past week. On Friday, we announced that we actually do have our label maker. Our GS1 label maker is out there now for everyone out there. You get your 10 first labels for free. Head to labels.orderful.com to learn more. But I think what's great about this, Thomas, and when you guys just had your AI summit the other day, and vibe coding has been out there, and we talk about AI a lot in this industry. And this tool in particular was put together by a few of our really great engineers within just a couple of weeks using AI. And it's a tool that we're able to give out for free as well. So, I'm excited because it is one of our first releases since I've been here at the company. But I'm even more excited because I think this release showcases that Orderful isn't just about modernizing, right, EDI as a whole, but modernizing just in generally how shippers and logistics providers are even looking at how they're, making their labels and what the companies that they are producing those with are doing to make that easier every day, and how a simple AI can help create, offerings like this, especially with a team that I'm working with that's just so innovative and looking for these challenges to fix every day as well.
Well, let's talk about what makes it so special with the labels. I'm learning a little bit about labels now. My wife's startup does cosmetics, and it turns out the most important thing is the label. Everything, if you get that wrong, God help you, because it has to go to 5 different places, and it's 3 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Talk about what makes the label stuff so important, and for folks who don't understand, and how that kind of ties into the larger picture of what you all are working on, which is helping with those transactions.
Totally. I mean, I love that you brought up, right, your own family business, because, we do work with a lot of small brands as well who are kind of in that same position. And GS1 labels, of course, are more of a universal language that are used for boxes and packaging as well, so that of course, we're speaking the same language across all different companies, Target, Walmart, etc. Those big retailers too. And I think what's great about this is we've used AI to make just creating these labels more simple for customers out there, right? We have real time input checks, smart caching as well. And again, you don't even have to be a customer, sign in or create an account if you're just creating about 10 labels. But if you are looking to get your own GS1 code, then you would set up an account from there. But I think it's, like I said, it's great because it's something that's simple that we're saying, hey, this shouldn't be as hard as it is, just like EDI work in particular. So our team has used our technology to create this extra offering for our customers, and even those who technically aren't our customers right now.
It's like a super fast name tag for packages. So that's one thing I like. And let's talk about the EDI and the other part of it aspect, because I remember you've started in logistics and 3PLs as well. So you and I come from functional backgrounds. The biggest surprise I think that people outside of the industry don't understand is that even though EDI has been around since the 70s, it is still the hot, sexy thing in addition to APIs because of the challenges of even getting it sent up. When we're talking about sending your 214 codes, you're having a handshake. It's like I'm sending dictionaries to one another. Dive into that aspect because I think it's so fascinating. Some people outside the industry are like, well, why aren't you just doing strict API? And it's like, if only you knew how things were.
Yeah, right. I love that you brought up those guidelines because you're absolutely right, and quite frequently a lot of those guidelines for this communication aren't the same between what we call a leader and a follower here at Orderful as well, and it can lead to pain points. Of course, I think cost is a huge one because as you scale, you start most providers in EDI you'll start to see those costs come up with every single transaction. We don't work that way. And I think that's a huge one. Our customers start to just at first, maybe that cost is small, but then as you do a great job, that's the best part about logistics, right? When you offer great customer service, you're going to start to see that customer expand. And you're likely going to get referrals into others. You start to see those costs expand as well. So I think that is a huge one. We're bringing modern technology to help bring down cost. But there's also just so many different types, like I said, of use cases that we've seen across customers. There's customers who are looking to meet different regulatory requirements, having to send maybe an EDI 856 instead for if they're food related in particular. A lot of times it's their vendors just don't play well. I mean, you and I talk about this all the time, especially maybe if you're looking at TMS or warehouse management, right? That any tech relationship you have is really a partnership, just like your carriers, just like your shippers, right? It's not just a one-off transaction. It's how do we grow together? And I think that's huge, is that just like I said, our team is out here working its butt off to, make this technology better for our customers. But is the provider using today continuing to look to innovate every single day moving forward? And if you are looking to innovate within your own four walls, or change your operations or make investments in other tech, do you have the provider that's going to make that onboarding experience painful or easy? And so I think we're big on onboarding. A lot of our customers have just praised us for how quickly we do get trading partners onboarded with them. But I think a lot of it too is just modernizing your tech across the scale, right? We talk about this all the time at FreightWaves is, how are you looking at how you're doing work a few years from now and not just today? And thinking to yourself, okay, well, do the pipes I have actually will get us to that point, right? We like to make that metaphor here. It's kind of like your house, right? If you want to add in another story or you want to grow your family, are your pipes prepared for that? And it's something you don't think about usually until it's a very unfortunate situation. So best thing is a lot of the customer pain points we have are EDI related, and we're able to help them through those challenges and get them out the other side more modernized and ready to grow as well.
Well, talking about the charging aspect, that's wild. I didn't know. It reminds me of, like, how Visa and other rails will charge you like 2 or 3% or transactions. Because I noticed that in the biz world that you'll get nickeled and dimed everywhere. And so for some other EDI providers, I guess once you reach a certain scale, they're like, oh, hey, I see you're doing really well. We're going to need a little more of that cut. Which that kind of blows my mind. I was like, dang, you're getting hosed on sending, just, EDI load tenders and stuff and package tenders. And here you are getting like, it's like a racket. It's extortion, I tell you.
Yeah, well, again, I think that goes into, how are you talking with your EDI providers for a better experience? We have an integration fee and then trading partner fees on top of that. But yeah, is the provider you're working with prepared to scale with you as well? Because you're right, Thomas, that's the exact problem I think people start to realize. And then, I mean, think about that, right? You see those costs continuing to grow, but then you're also thinking about integrating a new service or a new offering or switching systems, right? That's a big one. You want to switch your ERP, and that's just the moment you think about the data integration of that, you start to have a huge headache and think twice about it. That shouldn't be happening because of who your EDI provider is. So we're here to have those conversations and figure out what's the best way for you to move forward.
And talking about add-ons as well, one of the fascinating things that I love to see in this space is that the folks who are helping with EDIs, APIs, they're getting a large amount of access to data. They're also helping their customers make sense of the market and other stuff as well. Because as you're using that data, it's almost like a positive networking effect that you can say, oh yeah, by the way, we've got like 1,200 different customers running on this. Here's how things are looking. So it's almost like there's a changing nature. Before it, the talks used to be the simple nuts and bolts of integrations, but as well, there's like all these value adds that we're starting to see in the freight tech world that, I mean, I don't think we ever saw the proliferation 10 years ago of so much potential for index-based insights, market analysis. Everyone just kind of hoarded their data and didn't want to try to turn it into something extra.
And now it's all about the extra, right? I mean, truly, especially the logistics providers field. I mean, you hear me talk about all the time how I think the transactional broker of the past, I think Jet, right, from P44 was just talking about this a while back. That's gonna die, and that's gonna die hard, and not like the movie. It'll be the opposite of the movie. It'll be good or bad, not good. But you have to prepare for that future, and that means, yeah, you're 100% right. Do you have your hands on your data? Are you able to integrate all of your data into one reporting tool so that you can start providing your shippers and your customers and even your carriers with better information that's going to help them succeed as well? That's what logistics service providing is going to turn into. It's not going to be love the load boards and the 10 other ones announced this last week, but it's not going to be just throwing something on the load board and that's it. That's all you'll get from me. They're going to be looking to you for taking that data and helping them make decisions with it. So I love that you bring up the data point of it. And we're partners with Sonar as well. And that's more important, I think, than people realize, especially for tomorrow of logistics, not just today.
And now that we're doing a live show, I do have, it wouldn't be What the Truck without random fun shenanigans. One of them is on your website, you had a cool case study from last year, how the folks at Liquid Death, they gained some full visibility, 4 times quicker, 70% cost reduction, 80% faster onboarding. You won't believe this, but Grace, you're an unwilling participant of things I have found under my desk. Wait for it. I wish we had a drum roll. That cost way too much money. I found cans. Liquid
Nice.
I was wondering when I could use this.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of big brands. Dude Wipes, another one that we've worked with. We're really great, especially in the beverage section. Happy that you brought up Liquid Death. I mean, I think a perfect example of a company who is scaling very fast, right? We all remember Liquid Death. It was just here. It wasn't here one day, and it was here the next, and it was everywhere. Well, imagine that growth for a company who's just a small brand trying to figure it out and finding out a process called EDI is slowing you down, right? That doesn't need to happen. And so I would suggest all brands go check our web EDI platform and reach out to us for more demos as well, because when you're someone like Liquid Death, and I'm sure you hit that, your marketing plan works and you start to see those sales go, and these different retailers and companies saying, hey, we want your product on our shelves, but we need to be integrated in order to make that work. Well, you don't want that stopping you, right? Especially in this economy. So yeah, thank you for bringing up Liquid Death, because I think they're a great customer and a great showcase of a company ramping up and who needs that integration as soon as possible.
Well, we're going to kick it and we're going to also expand on the freight science part because when you mentioned the faster onboarding, brings me back to the brokerage days, which it's now prompted me. I love the case studies because if you're wondering, let's say I'm a 3PL and I land Liquid Death. Liquid Death is like, I got to expand. I got to go. I just got this deal. We're going to make a lot of Liquid Death. I need some more providers to help me, whether it's a carrier, broker, 4PL. But the problem is, with EDIs and APIs, you have to talk with their systems. And so it's just as important that you can't wait 3 weeks for them because I've seen it before when we've done it. I was at Arrive Logistics back in the day and I got to see how EDI set up. And it can feel like a game of painful pinball without a helper because you're like, did you get my code? 3 days later, no, I didn't get the code. Let me send you my code. And then you're like, crap, I could be making fat rips. I could be sending some loads out. So it's like almost I built this extension to my house, but my plumber is too slow because they don't know what kind of pipes they need. And so for listeners and stuff, this is one of the kind of foundational things of the supply chain that we really don't pay a lot of attention to. It's like power lines. We take power lines for granted, but if you put power lines up faster, then you can get more stuff done.
Yeah, I had a wonderful conversation with a 3PL leader recently on the same exact thing. And he had asked one of his top reps, who are your EDI customers and how do you like working for them? And he said, I love them because I know it's going to be freight coming over and I know it's going to be almost this continuous pipeline of work for him to do. And for the logistics providers out there, you're 100% right. Are you ready to get that phone call, to get that freight and service it as soon as possible? I ran into that same problem in logistics as well. We got a huge customer and they wanted this EDI integration done. And I mean, this was over a decade ago now, but I remember thinking, are we going to lose this opportunity? And when will we be welcomed back to this opportunity just because of this technological challenge we didn't even realize existed at that moment in time? So I think you're totally right. One, are you ready for it for when that business comes? And two, do you have customers today that you should be integrated with that you could be seeing more business from at the end of the day? So all those options work. And we both know it's, again, with all the work that goes into booking a load and finding a good carrier, the last thing you want is your integrations and the flow of data and trade to slow you down.
You can't be like that guy who has, like the tuxedo shirt where it's like, formal in the front, party in the back, or whatever they have now. You have to make sure that once you land the customer, they don't think you're some jabroni who can't get an EDI set up and they're like, oh, that's amateur. I can't believe I trusted you.
Exactly. Yeah. When Walmart says we want you, are you ready to get into Walmart right away? Right. And again, in this economy, imagine a brand who's like struggling to survive, lands that deal and can't because of something I would call the EDI they didn't even realize existed. So not only having that provider, but I can't tell you how many customers I've talked to who aren't technologists and are like, I know how to use this thing. Like this platform is amazing. So it's user friendly and it's friendly for you to grow your business too.
Well, knowledge is power, Grace. Thank you so much for hopping on, giving us some freight tech knowledge as
Yeah.
well. Always a
One
pleasure.
thing-
Folks want to learn more about Orderful. Check it out. What's the best way to get more info?
Well, that's a great question because we do have a new podcast that's going to be coming out soon and webinar series coming up as well. So head to LinkedIn, follow us on LinkedIn, search for us Orderful, go check our website at orderful.com, but make sure you follow us so that you can start to get notifications for when those episodes come out. And we've got some great guests lined up for you too.
Well, if you ever need some EDI horror stories or how I looked like a jabroni trying to get one set up, I got you covered, ma'am.
I love it. Thanks, Thomas.
It's a pleasure. We'll see you again soon. We got a little bit of housekeeping now. Unfortunately, dear listeners, the show is coming to a close, but what I want you to remember is we have the Freight Tech Awards. They're still going on. I want to make sure that you sign up for them. The Freight Tech 100. You can go on there. Some important dates to remember, of course, is that September 1st is when nominations for the Freight Tech Awards close. So you have until 6 p.m. on Monday, September the 1st to put in your nominations. On September 22nd, the Freight Tech 100 winners are announced. And then we will have in October at the F3 Future of Freight Festival, we will be announcing the Freight Tech 25 winners. And so I always want to encourage people, put it in. You can nominate yourself as much as possible, and you can nominate your friends, your cats, your dogs. But for the 25, We're going to have a team of third-party folks that have been doing this for years. They're going to pick the top 25. It's always super exciting to see. We've had the past 2 years, we've had quite a bit of shakeups. And so thankfully, the folks at Betting Markets have not got a hold of our Freight Tech 100 list, because that would probably be a source of some degenerate gambling. While we're at it, sign up for F3. We have a special discount code. It is WWTF325. That's what the truck F325 gets you $900 off. So hey, in this economy, every cent counts. There it is, code at the bottom. All right, folks, that's a wrap for this Monday. Thank you all so much for joining me. I'll be back Wednesday and Friday. Party on, party hard, be safe, and hey, stay classy. I'll see you again. It's been an absolute pleasure listening to what you